Veltar's crystalline body clicked softly as he walked through the metal corridors of the human space station. The sound echoed in the narrow hallways, mixing with the constant hum of machines. He had never been on a human ship before. Everything felt small and cramped compared to the wide, open spaces his people preferred. The Zephyrian stopped at a large window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his enemies were waiting. The Devourers had been hunting his people for 300 years. They consumed everything they touched, turning entire worlds into twisted versions of themselves. His own home planet had fallen when he was young. He still remembered the screams. "You must be our new friend." Veltar turned around. A human woman stood behind him, wearing the blue uniform of their military. She was small, like all humans, but something in her eyes made him think of deep water, dangerous and calm at the same time. "I am Commander Hyunwoo," she said. "Welcome to Station Alpha 7. "I am Veltar of the Zephyrian Intelligence Corps," he replied. His voice came out as musical tones that the translation device changed into human words. "I have come to observe your methods." Hyunwoo smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Our methods. Yes, I've read your file. Your people think we're primitive." "Not primitive," Veltar said carefully. "Young. Your species only learned to travel between stars 200 years ago. Most civilizations need thousands of years to develop effective military strategies. And yet we keep winning battles that older species lose." Hyunwoo started, walking down the corridor. Veltar followed. "Tell me, how many worlds has your people taken back from the Devourers?" The question stung. "None," Veltar admitted. "We have managed to stop their advance in several systems, but we have never reclaimed, lost territory. We've taken back 12 worlds in the past 50 years. Veltar's crystal structure flickered with surprise. This was not in any of the reports he had read. "How?" "That's what you're here to learn." They entered a large room filled with humans, working at control panels. Screens showed star maps, ship movements, and streams of data. At the center of it all stood a tall human man with gray hair and scars on his hands. "Commander Jinho," Hyunwoo called. "This is our Zephyrian observer." Jinho looked up from his screens. His eyes were the color of old steel, and when he looked at Veltar, the alien felt like he was being measured for something. "So you're the one who wants to see how we fight," Jinho said. "Good. We need all the help we can get for this mission." "What mission?" Veltar asked. Jinho pointed to a screen, showing a blue-green planet surrounded by dark shapes. New Busan. 200,000 human civilians trapped on the surface. Devourer hive ships moved in 3 days ago and cut off all escape routes. Veltar studied the tactical display. The Devourer fleet was positioned perfectly. Any rescue attempt would have to fight through layers of bioships, each one capable of adapting to whatever weapons were used against it. It was the kind of defensive position that had stopped every Zephyrian assault for the past century. "This is impossible," Veltar said. "The positioning is too strong. A direct assault would result in total loss of the attacking force." "Probably," Jinho agreed. "Then why attempt it?" Jinho looked at him with those steel-gray eyes. "Because those are our people down there." A young human woman approached them. She wore a white coat instead of a uniform, and her hands were stained with chemicals. "Commander, I need to finish the compatibility test before we deploy. Dr. So-young, meet Veltar. He'll be observing the mission." So-young looked at Veltar with interest. "Fascinating. I've never worked with a crystalline life form before. May I?" She held up a small device. Veltar allowed her to scan his body. The device hummed and clicked, recording data about his structure and energy patterns. "Interesting," So-young muttered, frowning at her readings. "Your crystal matrix shows unusual resonance patterns when exposed to human biosignatures. Have you experienced this before?" "No," Veltar said. "Is it dangerous?" "I don't think so. It might actually help you understand us better." She made some notes on her tablet. "You're cleared for deployment." Over the next few hours, Veltar watched the humans prepare for their mission. Everything about their approach seemed wrong. Where Zephyrian forces would spend weeks planning each move, humans seemed to make decisions in minutes. Where his people would bring overwhelming technological advantage, humans loaded their ships with primitive chemical weapons and simple metal bullets. Most disturbing of all was how calm they seemed. Veltar had fought in many battles against the Devourers. Before each engagement, his fellow soldiers would perform meditation rituals to prepare their minds for the horror they would face. They would pray to their ancestors and speak words of farewell to their loved ones. The humans just went about their work. He found himself in the ship's armory watching a female sergeant named Minji check weapons with her soldiers. They were cleaning guns that looked like museum pieces compared to Zephyrian energy weapons. "Why do you not use energy-based armaments?" Veltar asked. Minji looked up from the rifle she was cleaning. "Energy weapons are great against shields and armor, but Devourers don't use those. They use living tissue, and living tissue bleeds when you put holes in it." "But surely your advanced weapons would be more effective." One of the soldiers, a young man named Tae-hyun, laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "Advanced weapons are for civilized enemies. Devourers aren't civilized." Veltar watched them work. They moved with practiced efficiency, but there was something else in their actions, something he could not identify. It made his crystal structure vibrate with unease. That evening, he attended the final mission briefing. The plan was simple to the point of being suicidal. 12 human ships would attack the Devourer fleet directly, while 3 Zephyrian vessels provided long-range support. The humans would fight their way to the planet's surface and extract as many civilians as possible. "What about acceptable losses?" Veltar asked. The room went quiet. Commander Hyun-woo looked at him with those dark, deep eyes. "There are no acceptable losses," she said. "There are only necessary ones." "But surely you have calculated the probability of mission success?" 43%, Jin-ho said without hesitation. Veltar's structure flickered with shock. "Those are terrible odds. No Zephyrian commander would approve such a mission." "No Zephyrian commander has 200,000 of his people trapped on a dying world," Hyun-woo replied. Later that night, Veltar could not rest. He wandered the ship's corridors trying to understand what he had seen. In the observation deck, he found Dr. So-young looking out at the stars. "Cannot sleep either?" she asked. "I do not understand your people," Veltar said. "You know this mission will likely fail. You know many of you will die. Yet you proceed anyway." So-young was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Have you ever had children, Veltar? My species does not reproduce in the same way as yours. Then you might not understand. When a parent sees their child in danger, they don't calculate odds. They don't consider alternatives. They act." She turned to look at him. "Those people on New Busan are our children. All of them. Even the ones you do not know. Especially the ones we do not know." Veltar left her there and returned to his quarters. As he tried to rest, he thought about her words. In the morning, they would face the Devourers. He would finally see how humans fought. He was beginning to suspect that victory and defeat might not mean the same thing to humans as they did to his people. The thought filled him with something he could not name. It felt like fear, but different. Deeper. Tomorrow he would learn what real horror looked like. The human ship Inchin's Fury felt different from the space station. Everything here was built for war. The walls were thicker, the corridors narrower, and every surface had scratches and dents from previous battles. Veltar could sense the history in the metal around him. This ship had seen terrible things. He was assigned quarters near the bridge, a small room with basic furniture and a window that showed the black of space. During the 3-day journey to New Busan, he tried to understand the humans around him. What he saw made his crystalline structure hum with confusion. Captain Jin-ho ran the ship like a machine, but not the cold, logical machines Veltar knew. This was something organic, alive. Orders flowed through the crew like blood through a body. When Jin-ho spoke, people moved without question. When he was silent, they worked without instruction. On the second day, Veltar found himself in the ship's training area. Sergeant Minji was teaching her Marines how to fight with knives, not energy blades or plasma cutters, but simple metal knives that their ancestors might have used. Why practice with such primitive weapons? Veltar asked. Minji stopped her demonstration. Because when the Devourers board your ship and your gun runs out of bullets and your energy cells are dead and your backup systems have failed, all you have left is this. She held up the knife. The metal gleamed under the lights. But surely, modern warfare does not involve such close combat? The Marines around him laughed. It was the same unpleasant sound he had heard before. One of them, a young woman named Yunji, spoke up. "You've never fought Devourers on a ship, have you?" she said. "They don't just attack from outside. They get inside. They move through the air vents, through the water pipes, through cracks in the hull you didn't even know existed. When they find you, you're usually alone in a dark corridor with whatever you can carry." Veltar watched them practice. They moved like dancers, but dancers performing a dance of death. Each movement was designed to kill quickly and efficiently. There was no art in it, no grace, just brutal effectiveness. "How often do human ships get boarded?" he asked. "Every battle," Minji said simply. That evening, Veltar joined the engineering crew for their daily maintenance. The chief engineer, Tae-hyun, was explaining the ship's systems to younger crew members. Unlike Zephyrian ships that used quantum, consciousness networks, human vessels relied on simple computers and manual controls. "Your AI systems are very limited," Veltar observed. "Why not use more advanced artificial intelligence?" Tae-hyun looked at him with serious eyes. "Because AI thinks logically. In a fight with Devourers, logic will get you killed." "I do not understand. Logic says you should retreat when facing superior odds. Logic says you should not sacrifice yourself for others. Logic says you should preserve resources for future battles." Tae-hyun tapped his head. "But sometimes the only way to win is to do things that don't make sense. Such as ramming your ship into an enemy vessel to save a transport full of civilians. Such as fighting hand-to-hand in a breached hull while the air is escaping into space. Such as staying at your post when the smart thing to do is run." Tae-hyun's voice was quiet. "We've learned that some fights require beings willing to die badly." The words sent vibrations through Veltar's crystal structure. He had heard similar concepts before, but only in ancient Zephyrian poetry about legendary heroes. He had never expected to hear them as practical military doctrine. On the third day, they reached the edge of the new Busan system. Veltar joined Captain Jin Ho on the bridge as the sensors began picking up enemy signals. The Devourer fleet was exactly where intelligence had predicted it would be. 12 bioships, Jin Ho announced. Heavy class. They've been feeding on the planet's ecosystem for 3 days. Veltar looked at the tactical display. The enemy vessels looked like giant insects, their hull made of living tissue that pulsed with internal light. Each one was the size of a human cruiser, but they moved with organic grace that made them hard to target. "The Zephyrian ships are requesting permission to begin long-range bombardment," the communications officer reported. "Denied," Jin Ho said. "We go in together." "Captain," Veltar said carefully, "my people's ships are equipped with advanced energy weapons. They can engage the enemy from a safe distance while you provide support." Jin Ho turned to look at him. Those steel-gray eyes seemed to see right through him. "Safe distance? That's how your people fight, isn't it? Stay back. Use superior technology, minimize risk. It is the logical approach." "Logic." Jin Ho said the word like it tasted bad. "Tell me, Veltar, how many Devourer fleets has Zephyrian logic defeated?" The question stung because Veltar knew the answer. "We have achieved several tactical victories." "How many fleets?" Jin Ho interrupted. "None," Veltar admitted. "We've destroyed 17 fleets in the past 10 years. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of machinery. Veltar felt his crystal structure pulse with confusion. The numbers did not make sense. Human ships were less advanced. Human weapons were more primitive. Human tactics seemed suicidal. Yet they won battles that his people could not. "All ships," Jin Ho announced into his communications device. "Begin the attack." What happened next made Veltar question everything he thought he knew about space combat. The Zephyrian vessels took position at the edge of the system and began firing precise energy beams at the enemy fleet. Their shots were perfectly calculated, targeting weak points in the bioship's structure. It was textbook tactics, the kind taught in military academies across the galaxy. The human ships did something else entirely. They accelerated directly toward the enemy fleet at maximum speed. No formation, no coordinated firing plan, no attempt to maintain safe distance. They just charged forward like ancient cavalry. "Captain," the weapons officer called out, "we're in range for long-range missiles." "Hold fire," Jinho replied. "Sir, we could damage several enemy ships before they can respond. Hold fire." Veltar watched the tactical display in growing horror. The human ships were flying straight into the most dangerous part of space, where the Devourer bioships could bring all their weapons to bear. It was suicide. The first Devourer shots reached them. Living acid that ate through metal, bioelectric, pulses that fried computer systems, clouds of parasitic organisms that tried to infect any ship they touched. The human formation scattered as vessels took damage. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported. "Fire on Decks 3 and 4, another voice called. "Busan Dawn has lost main engines." Jinho listened to the reports without changing expression. Around him, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency, as if flying into hell was something they did every day. "Sir," the weapons officer said again, "we're now in close range. Recommend immediate engagement." Not yet. The enemy bioships were changing formation now, moving to surround the human fleet. Their organic hulls rippled as they prepared to board and consume the invading vessels. Veltar had seen this tactic before. Once the Devourers got inside a ship, the battle was over. "Now we're in knife range," Jinho said quietly. "All ships, weapons free." The human fleet opened fire at point-blank range, but instead of the precise, calculated shots Veltar expected, they used everything they had: missiles, bullets, chemical bombs, even pieces of metal fired from magnetic cannons. It was chaos, and it was working. The bioships reeled under the assault. Their living hulls, designed to adapt to energy weapons, could not cope with the variety of damage being inflicted. Some parts tried to grow armor against bullets, while other parts tried to develop immunity to chemical weapons. The biological systems fought each other, creating weak points that the humans immediately exploited. "Soul's Pride is ramming the enemy flagship," someone reported. Veltar looked at the screen in disbelief. One of the human ships had lost most of its weapons and was flying directly at the largest bioship. The two vessels collided in a burst of fire and organic matter. Both were destroyed instantly. "Acceptable losses?" Veltar asked. Jinho looked at him with those terrible eyes. "There are no acceptable losses, only necessary ones." As the battle continued, Veltar began to understand, something that chilled his crystal core. The humans were not just fighting the enemy ships. They were fighting in a way that their own survival was secondary to mission success. They took risks that would have been unthinkable to any other species. When a bioship tried to board the Inchon's Fury, human marines met it in the corridors with those primitive knives and simple guns. They fought in spaces filled with toxic atmosphere, while the ship's hull cracked around them, while pieces of the enemy ate through the walls, and they were winning. The battle ended when the last bioship tried to escape toward New Busan's surface. 3 human vessels, all badly damaged, followed it down through the atmosphere. Veltar watched them disappear into the clouds, wondering if he would ever understand what he had witnessed. "Prepare for ground operations," Jinho announced. Veltar realized that the space battle had just been the beginning. The real horror was waiting for them on the planet below. The transport ship shook as it entered New Busan's atmosphere. Through the small windows, Veltar could see the planet's surface below. What should have been green forests and blue rivers was now a twisted landscape of black and red. The Devourers had been feeding here for days, and their corruption spread like a disease across the world. "First time seeing a feeding zone?" Lieutenant Do-hyun asked. He was a young human with quick eyes and steady hands. His squad would be Veltar's escort during the ground mission. "Yes," Veltar replied. His crystal structure hummed with unease as he looked down at the infected landscape. On my world, we could only see the aftermath. By the time our rescue ships arrived, everything was already dead. This isn't dead, said Yunji, the squad's medic. She was cleaning her equipment with the same calm efficiency he had seen throughout the human fleet. Dead would be easier. The transport landed in what had once been an industrial area outside New Busan's capital city. Now it looked like something from a nightmare. The factories were still there, but they had been changed. Their metal walls pulsed with organic life. Tubes of living tissue connected the buildings like veins, and everywhere there was movement. Stay close, Do-hyun warned as they left the transport. Don't touch anything that looks alive. Don't breathe any mist or fog, and if you hear voices calling your name, don't listen. Veltar followed the human squad across the corrupted landscape. The ground beneath his feet felt soft and wet, like walking on meat. In the distance, he could see the shapes of what had once been human colonists. They were still moving, still working, but they were no longer entirely human. What are those? He asked, pointing to a group of figures near a converted factory. Shung-ho, the squad's communications specialist, looked where he was pointing. Workers, he said simply. The Devourers don't just kill people, they use them. As they got closer, Veltar could see what Shung-ho meant. The figures had human shapes, but their skin was wrong. It moved and shifted like liquid. Some had extra arms that ended in tools instead of hands. Others had heads that opened like flowers, revealing organs that pulsed with alien light. But the worst part was that they were still conscious. Help us, one of them called as the squad passed. The voice was human, desperate, terrified. Please, I can still think. I can still feel everything they're making me do. Do-hyun kept walking without stopping. His face showed no emotion, but Veltar noticed. His hands gripping his rifle more tightly. We have to help them, Veltar said. We will, Yunji replied. But not the way you think. They moved through the industrial zone in single file, following routes that Do-hyun seemed to know by heart. Veltar realized that humans had been fighting Devourers long enough to develop standard procedures for moving through infected areas. They knew which sounds meant danger, which movements indicated an attack, which colors meant the corruption was fresh and aggressive. How do you stand it? Veltar asked. The telepathic screams of the converted humans were getting louder in his mind. His crystal structure was vibrating with their pain and fear. Practice, Do-hyun said, without turning around. They reached their first objective, a small residential area where intelligence suggested civilians might still be hiding. The houses looked normal from a distance, but as they got closer, Veltar could see the wrongness in them. Windows that blinked like eyes, doors that breathed, walls that moved slightly, as if something large was crawling behind them. Movement. In House 7. Sung-ho reported quietly into his radio. Looks like survivors. They approached the house carefully. Do-hyun knocked on the door in a pattern. 3 quick, 2 slow, 3 quick again. After a moment, the door opened. A human woman looked out, her eyes wide with fear and hope. Are you real? She whispered. Or are you another trick? We're real, Do-hyun said gently. We're here to get you out. Behind the woman, Veltar could see more survivors. Men, women, children, all crowded into what had once been a living room. They looked thin and scared, but they were still human. How many? Yunji asked. 15 adults, 7 children, the woman replied. Can they walk? Most of them. Mrs. Park has a broken leg, and little Woo Jin has been sick since the attack started. Yunji moved into the house to examine the injured. Veltar followed and immediately felt the difference. Inside the house, the telepathic screams were quieter. The survivors had found some way to block the Devourer's mental influence. How did you resist the conversion? He asked the woman. She looked at him with surprise. You're not human. I am Veltar of the Zephyrian Intelligence Corps. I am here to observe human tactics. The woman, she introduced herself as Dr. Nam-hee, sat down heavily on a chair. We didn't resist it, she said quietly. It just stopped working on us after a while. What do you mean? The first day was the worst. The voices in our heads telling us to come outside to join them. Some people couldn't fight it. They went out and changed. Her voice broke. My husband was one of them. I watched him turn into something else while he begged me to help him. Veltar felt his crystal structure pulse with sympathy. I am sorry. But then something strange happened. The voices got weaker. The compulsion to join them faded. It was like our minds built up resistance to their influence. She looked at the other survivors. We think it has something to do with grief. The more we mourned our losses, the less power they had over us. Before Veltar could ask more questions, Seung-ho's radio crackled to life. This is command. Large devourer force moving toward your position. You have maybe 10 minutes before they arrive. Do-hyun was already organizing the evacuation. Yoonji, can the injured travel? Mrs. Park needs a stretcher, but the rest can walk. Seung-ho, call for transport pickup at Rally Point 3. Already done, sir. Veltar watched the humans work. In minutes, they had the survivors organized and moving. The injured were carried by the healthy. The children were kept in the center of the group. Everyone knew their job without being told. They were halfway to the rally point when the devourers found them. The attack came from all sides at once. Converted humans emerged from buildings, their changed bodies moving with inhuman speed. Behind them came worse things. Creatures that had once been animals or maybe machines twisted into new forms that hurt to look at. Defensive circle! Do-hyun shouted. The human soldiers moved to surround the civilians. They did not retreat or seek cover. They simply stood their ground and began firing. Veltar found himself in the middle of the circle, watching the battle unfold around him. The devourers' converted slaves rushed forward, screaming with voices that were still partially human. They begged for help even as they attacked. They cried for their mothers while their changed hands tried to kill, and the human soldiers killed them. Yoonji put 3 bullets into what had once been a young man, then immediately moved to bandage, a cut on a child's arm. Seung-ho shot down a creature that might have been someone's grandmother, then helped an elderly man to his feet. Do-hyun used a knife to finish something that was begging him to end its suffering, then gave water to a woman who was crying. Veltar realized he was witnessing something that no other species could do. The humans were fighting enemies that looked like their own people, who spoke with familiar voices, who pleaded for mercy even as they attacked. And they were doing what needed to be done while still caring for those they protected. The battle lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. When the last converted human fell, Do-hyun immediately began moving the group again. Why did they stop fighting? Veltar asked. There were more of them than us. Because we killed the controllers, Yoonji replied. She was treating a wound on one of the soldiers, her hands steady despite what they had just been through. The devourers used the converted as puppets, cut the strings, and the puppets stopped moving. But how did you know which ones were the controllers? Do-hyun looked at him with those human eyes that seemed older than they should be. Experience. We've done this before. They reached the rally point just as the transport arrived. As the survivors were loaded aboard, Dr. Namhee grabbed Veltar's arm. You wanted to know how we resisted them, she said. I didn't tell you everything. What do you mean? It wasn't just grief that made us immune. It was what we did with that grief. Her eyes were bright with tears. We turned it into rage. Pure, focused rage at what they had done to our loved ones, and somehow that made us too dangerous for them to control. The transport lifted off, carrying the survivors to safety. But Veltar knew this was just one small group. There were thousands more civilians somewhere in the city, and the devourers were learning from each encounter. Where to next? He asked. Do-hyun. The lieutenant checked his map. Downtown. Intelligence thinks there's a large group of survivors in the underground tunnels. He looked up at Veltar. That's where the real nest is, where the queen feeds. Veltar felt his crystal structure hum with dread. If what he had seen so far was just the outer edge of the devourer presence, he could not imagine what horrors waited in the heart of their territory. But the humans were already preparing for the next mission. They cleaned their weapons, checked their supplies, and got ready to do it all again. Veltar was beginning to understand that this was what made them so effective against the Devourers. They did not fight one battle and rest. The entrance to the underground tunnels looked like a wound in the earth. What had once been a maintenance access for the city's water and power systems was now a pulsing opening lined with organic tissue. The metal stairs that led down into darkness were covered with something that looked like skin. Captain Jinho studied the tunnel entrance through his binoculars. Around him, the strike team prepared their equipment in silence. Veltar watched them work and noticed something different about these humans. They moved more carefully than the soldiers he had seen before. Their faces were harder. "This is a volunteer mission only," Jinho announced. "Anyone who wants to stay topside can do so without shame. What we're going into down there, it's not something you can prepare for." Nobody moved to leave. The strike team was small. Besides Jinho and Veltar, there were only 4 other humans. Wu Jin was their demolitions expert, a quiet man with steady hands and sad eyes. He Jin was their sniper, a woman who seemed to see everything around her but said very little. The other 2 were veterans of previous nest assaults, Minho and Subin. "The plan is simple," Jinho explained. "We go down, find the queen, plant the charges, and get out. The tunnels are probably full of converted civilians, so we shoot anything that moves. No exceptions." "What about survivors?" Veltar asked. Jinho looked at him with those steel-gray eyes. "There are no survivors in the nest, not anymore." They descended into the tunnel system single file. Veltar's crystal structure provided some light, but the organic growths on the walls seemed to absorb illumination. Everything was dim and red, like being inside a living creature. The first tunnel was relatively normal, just concrete walls with patches of alien tissue growing on them. But as they went deeper, the corruption became worse. The walls breathed. The floor moved slightly under their feet. And always there were the voices. "Help me. Please, I'm still here. Don't leave me." Like this. The voices came from everywhere and nowhere. Sometimes Veltar could see shapes in the walls, human forms trapped in the living tissue, still conscious, still aware of what had been done to them. "How do you ignore them?" he asked Wu Jin, who was walking beside him. "You don't." Wu Jin replied quietly. "You just keep moving anyway." They had been walking for an hour when they found the first nest chamber. It was a large space that had once been a subway station. Now it was something from a nightmare. The platform was covered with organic pods, each one containing a human body in various stages of conversion. Some were still recognizable as people. Others had been changed into things that had no name. "Processing center," Subin said. "This is where they change people into workers and soldiers." Veltar watched the pods pulse with internal light. Inside each one, he could see a human face. Some were peaceful as if sleeping. Others were twisted in expressions of eternal agony. "We have to destroy this place," he said. "We will," Jinho replied. "But first we need to reach the queen. She's the source. Kill her, and all of this dies." They planted explosive charges throughout the chamber and continued deeper. The tunnels became worse as they descended. The walls were completely organic now, pulsing with alien life. The air was thick and wet like breathing inside a lung, and the voices grew louder. "Turn back," they whispered. "Join us. It doesn't hurt after the first few minutes." "Stay focused," Minho warned. "The deeper we go, the stronger their mental influence becomes." Veltar could feel it, a pressure in his mind trying to convince him that surrender was the logical choice. The humans had to be feeling it too, but they kept walking. Their faces showed the strain, but their feet never stopped moving. They were passing through a narrow corridor when Wu Jin suddenly stopped. "Contact," he whispered. Ahead of them, shapes moved in the red darkness. At first, Veltar thought they were more converted humans. Then they got closer, and he saw what they really were. They had once been the rescue team that had come before them. Veltar could see the remains of human military equipment, but the bodies wearing it had been changed into something else. They moved like spiders, their limbs bent in impossible directions. Their faces were still human, but their eyes glowed with alien intelligence. "Rodriguez," Jinho said quietly, looking at one of the creatures. "I sent him down here 3 days ago." The creature that had once been Rodriguez tilted its head and spoke with a voice like breaking glass. "Captain, you came back for us. How touching." "I'm sorry, soldier," Jinho said, raising his weapon. "Don't be sorry," Rodriguez replied. "Be jealous. You have no idea how good it feels to finally understand everything. The pain stops, Captain. All the pain stops." The battle was brief and terrible. The converted soldiers moved with inhuman speed and strength, but they still fought with human tactics. Wu Jin knew how Rodriguez liked to attack. He Jin remembered Minsu's preferred cover positions. They used their knowledge of their former comrades to kill them. When it was over, Jinho knelt beside what was left of Rodriguez. "I should have gotten you out sooner," he said. "Captain," Subin called softly, "we need to move. This noise will have attracted attention." They continued deeper into the nest. The tunnels were becoming more like arteries now, with organic walls that contracted and expanded rhythmically. Veltar realized they were inside something alive, not just infected spaces, but actual living tissue that had grown throughout. "The tunnel system. We're inside the Queen," he said with horror. "Part of her," Jinho confirmed. "The nest and the Queen are the same thing. We're walking through her digestive system." The thought made Veltar's crystal structure vibrate with revulsion. But the humans just kept walking, as if being inside a living creature was something they did every day. They reached a large chamber that pulsed with bioluminescent light. In the center was a massive organic structure that looked like a heart crossed with a brain. Tubes of living tissue connected it to thousands of smaller chambers, each one containing a human body. "The core," Wu Jin said. "That's where she processes the neural patterns, turns human consciousness into part of her collective." But as they approached, Veltar heard something that made his crystal structure ring like a bell. It was not the usual whispers or screams. It was singing, the voices of thousands of converted humans all singing together in perfect harmony. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The melody spoke of unity, of peace, of an end to all suffering and struggle. "It's so beautiful," Yijin whispered. She had lowered her rifle and was walking toward the core. "Yijin!" Jinho shouted, but she was not listening anymore. The singing grew louder, more compelling. Veltar felt his own consciousness being drawn toward it. The promise of peace, of belonging, of never having to make difficult choices again. One by one, the humans began to walk toward the core. Even Jinho was struggling against the mental influence, his feet moving forward despite his obvious efforts to resist. But then Wu Jin did something unexpected. He pulled out a photograph from his pocket, a picture of a young woman and 2 small children, and looked at it. The singing faltered for just a moment. "My family," he said, his voice cracking. "The Devourers took them on Kepler 7. I wasn't there to protect them." He looked up at the core with eyes full of rage and pain. "You want to know what humans really are? We're the species that chooses our own suffering." He activated the explosive charges on his belt and walked into the core. The explosion shook the entire tunnel system. The beautiful singing stopped, replaced by a sound like the death cry of some impossibly large creature. The organic walls began to dissolve, and the converted humans in their chambers simply stopped moving. "Run!" Jinho shouted. They raced through collapsing tunnels as the nest died around them. The walls were melting, the floor was giving way, and behind them they could hear the Queen's final screams. Veltar used his crystal structure to provide light as they fled through the darkness. They reached the surface just as the entire tunnel system collapsed in on itself. Where the nest had been, there was now just a smoking crater. The Devourer presence on New Busan was broken, but the cost was terrible. Wu Jin was dead. Half the strike team was injured, and Veltar had seen something that would haunt him forever. "How do you do it?" he asked Jinho as they waited for evacuation. "How do you choose to suffer when you could choose peace?" Jin-Ho looked at the smoking remains of the nest. Because peace that comes from surrender isn't really peace. It's just another form of death. He turned those steel-gray eyes on Veltar. And we'd rather die as humans than live as something else. Veltar finally understood what made humans so effective against the Devourers. It was not their weapons or their tactics or their courage. It was their absolute refusal to give up what made them human, no matter how much easier it would be to let go. The Devourers offered unity, peace, an end to all struggle, and humans looked at that offer and said no. That was the real horror. Not what they faced, but what they were willing to become to face it. They turned themselves into weapons, into monsters, into things that could do terrible necessary work, and they did it by choice. Veltar lay in the medical bay of the Inchen's Fury, staring at the ceiling panels above his bed. His crystal structure was healing from the physical damage he had taken in the tunnels, but there were other wounds that would not close so easily. 3 days had passed since the destruction of the Devourer nest on New Busan. The mission was officially a success. The planet was free, the surviving civilians had been evacuated, and the alien threat had been eliminated. The reports would speak of tactical victories and strategic gains. The reports would not mention the cost. 60% of the human forces were dead or wounded. Captain Jin-Ho had lost his left arm when debris from the collapsing nest caught their evacuation transport. Sergeant Minji would never walk properly again after a converted human had crushed her leg. And those were just the physical injuries. Veltar had watched the human survivors in the days after the battle. They went about their duties with the same calm efficiency he had observed before, but something was different. Their eyes were more distant. Their movements were more careful. They carried themselves like people who had seen too much and were trying very hard not to think about it. "How are you feeling?" Veltar turned to see Dr. So Young entering the medical bay. She looked tired, older than she had just a week ago. Her hands, which had been stained with chemicals when he first met her, were now stained with other things. "My physical structure is healing adequately," Veltar replied. "But I find myself confused by what I have witnessed." So Young sat down in the chair beside his bed. "That's normal. Most species have that reaction when they first see humans in real combat. How do you bear it? The things you must do, the choices you must make?" So Young was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "We don't bear it. Not really. We just continue anyway. I do not understand the difference. Bearing something means you can carry it without being changed by it. Continuing means you keep going even when the weight of what you carry is crushing you." She looked at her hands. "Every human who fights the Devourers is broken by it. We all carry pieces of the people we've had to kill, the friends we couldn't save, the choices we've had to make." Veltar thought about Wu Jin walking into the nest's core with a photograph of his dead family. "Then why do you continue?" "Because if we don't, who will?" Over the next few days, Veltar moved through the ship and observed the humans as they prepared for their next mission. Because there was always a next mission, another world under attack, another population in danger, another impossible choice to be made. He found Captain Jin-Ho in the ship's observation deck, looking out at the stars. The captain's left arm was gone, replaced by a mechanical prosthetic that clicked softly when he moved. "I am sorry about your arm," Veltar said. Jin-Ho looked at the prosthetic and flexed the artificial fingers. "It's not the first part of myself I've lost to this war. Won't be the last either." "Do you regret it? The choices that led to this?" "Every day," Jin-Ho replied without hesitation. "But regret is a luxury we can't afford. The Devourers don't stop because we're tired or hurt or broken. They just keep coming. My people have been fighting them for 3 centuries, Veltar said. "We have superior technology, better weapons, more advanced tactics. Yet we have never won a decisive victory. Why are humans different?" Jin-Ho was quiet for a long time. "Because your people fight to preserve something. Your culture, your civilization, your way of life. We fight for something else. What? The right to choose. The right to decide for ourselves what we preserve and what we sacrifice. Jinho turned those steel-gray eyes on Veltar. The Devourers offer unity, peace, an end to suffering. And maybe they're right. Maybe joining them would be easier than fighting them. But we've decided that the choice to resist, even if it's the wrong choice, is more important than being forced into the right one. Veltar felt his crystal structure pulse with understanding. You do not fight to win, you fight to remain free to lose. Now you're getting it. That evening, Veltar attended a memorial service for the humans who had died on New Busan. It was held in the ship's main cargo bay, which had been cleared and decorated with pictures of the dead. Hundreds of faces looked down from the walls, young and old, male and female, all united by the fact that they would never see another sunrise. The service was simple. Each person who had known one of the dead stood up and told a story about them. Not about how they died, but about how they lived. Their jokes, their fears, their dreams for the future they would never see. When it came time to speak about Wu Jin, Hye-jin stood up. She was still recovering from the mental influence of the nest, and her voice shook when she spoke. Wu Jin used to show everyone pictures of his family, she said. His wife and 2 daughters. They died 3 years ago, but he carried their picture everywhere. He said it reminded him why he fought. She paused, wiping tears from her eyes. He could have joined them. The nest offered him that. But he chose to remember them instead of forgetting them. He chose to carry the pain of losing them instead of letting it go. Veltar realized that this was what made humans so terrifying to the Devourers. Other species fought to avoid pain, to minimize loss, to find the path that caused the least suffering. Humans had learned to weaponize their pain, to use their losses as fuel for continued resistance. After the service, Dr. So Young found him again. You'll be requesting transfer back to your own people soon, she said. It was not a question. Yes, Veltar replied. I have learned what I came to learn. And what was that? Veltar thought about everything he had seen. The space battle, the ground fighting, the horror in the tunnels, the memorial service. I learned that humans do not fight like other species because you are not fighting for victory. You are fighting so that everyone else can afford to lose. So Young nodded. Will you tell your people that? I will try, though I do not know if they will understand. Understanding isn't the goal, So Young said. Survival is. 2 days later, Veltar boarded a transport that would take him back to Zephyrian space. As the ship pulled away from the Incheon's fury, he watched the human vessel growing smaller in the distance. It was already turning toward its next mission, its next impossible battle, its next necessary sacrifice. In his final report to Zephyrian, High Command Veltar wrote, Humans are not superior warriors because they are fearless. They are superior because they have learned to function despite being afraid. They are not stronger than other species. They are more willing to be broken in service of their goals. They do not win because they are smarter or more advanced. They win because they are willing to pay prices that other species consider unacceptable. The Devourers offer peace through unity, an end to individual suffering through collective consciousness. Most species see this as a choice between freedom and slavery. Humans see it as a choice between remaining human and becoming something else. And they have decided that being human, with all its pain and struggle and difficulty, is worth preserving. This makes them dangerous allies and terrifying enemies. They will do things that other species cannot imagine, not because they are cruel, but because they have accepted that sometimes cruelty is the only way to prevent greater cruelty. We cannot become like them. Our psychology, our culture, our entire way of thinking is different. But we can learn from them. We can understand that some fights require warriors who are willing to be destroyed by the act of fighting. And we can be grateful that such warriors exist even if we cannot be them ourselves. The real horror is not what humans face in battle. The real horror is what they are willing to become so that others do not have to become it themselves. They carry the darkness so that the rest of us can live in the light. I recommend immediate expansion of joint operations with human forces, not because they will teach us to fight better, but because they will fight the battles we cannot win, pay the prices we cannot afford, and make the choices we cannot make. They are not like us. And we should be grateful for that difference because it may be the only thing that saves us all. Veltar sealed the report and transmitted it to High Command. Then he looked out the window at the stars, knowing that somewhere, out there, humans were preparing for their next battle. They would face it with the same calm determination he had witnessed, carry the weight of necessary choices, and continue fighting not because they enjoyed it, but because someone had to. And maybe, if he was very lucky, he would never have to understand what that felt like.